What happens when money meets justice? I'm Frank Caprio, and in my 38 years on this bench, I thought I'd seen every type of arrogance. Then Christina Blackwell walked into my courtroom. She didn't just walk in, she swept in like she owned the place, designer heels clicking against my courtroom floor with the rhythm of entitlement. Her Chanel suit probably cost more than my bailiff makes in 2 months. But it wasn't her clothes that caught my attention. It was her eyes, cold, calculating, already dismissing everyone around her as beneath her notice. I've learned to read people in seconds. 38 years of watching human nature unfold in this room teaches you things they don't mention in law school. Christina Blackwell radiated the kind of confidence that comes from never hearing the word no. And she was about to learn something new. "Mrs. Blackwell," I began, reviewing her file, parking in a handicapped space outside Providence General Hospital while visiting her plastic surgeon for a routine consultation. The violation seemed minor until I read the details. She'd blocked the only handicapped van access during a children's therapy session. Parents carrying disabled children had to walk an extra 50 yards in the rain because Christina Blackwell needed convenient parking for her cosmetic appointment. "Your Honor," she interrupted before I could finish, "I assume we can handle this quickly. I have a board meeting at 11. She checked her diamond watch with theatrical impatience. "How much is the fine?" In my decades of service, I've developed what my wife calls my teaching moment instincts. Something about Christina's assumption that justice was purchasable triggered those instincts. "Mrs. Blackwell, before we discuss penalties, help me understand something. Were you aware this was a handicapped space?" Her laugh was sharp, brittle. "Of course I was aware, but I was only inside for 20 minutes. It's not like I hurt anyone." The courtroom was packed that morning. Families, working people, elderly citizens, all waiting their turn for justice, all watching Christina Blackwell treat their courthouse like her personal inconvenience. "Actually, Mrs. Blackwell, you did hurt people." I pulled out the witness statements my clerk had gathered. "Mrs. Sarah Martinez had to carry her 7-year-old son with spina bifida through the rain because you blocked the van access. Little Michael's wheelchair couldn't navigate the alternate path. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face, but it lasted maybe 2 seconds. "Your Honor, that's unfortunate, but parking is clearly inadequate at that facility. One handicapped space for a medical complex that size? That's poor planning, not my problem." The temperature in my courtroom seemed to drop 10 degrees. Even my court reporter looked up from her keyboard. "Mrs. Blackwell, are you suggesting that inadequate parking justifies blocking handicapped access?" She straightened, her voice taking on the tone I imagine she used in boardrooms. "I'm suggesting that practical people find practical solutions. I needed 5 minutes to confirm my appointment. Sometimes inconvenience is unavoidable." But I wasn't finished learning about Christina Blackwell. My clerk handed me another folder, her driving record from the DMV. What I found there painted a disturbing pattern. "Mrs. Blackwell, this is your 4th parking violation this year. 2 more handicapped spaces, 1 fire lane, and 1 blocked emergency exit. Each time you paid the fine and moved on. Is that your understanding of how this works?" Her composure cracked slightly. "I pay my fines promptly. I follow the process." "The process isn't a subscription service for illegal parking, Mrs. Blackwell. These violations suggest someone who believes rules are suggestions. That's when she made her catastrophic mistake. Your Honor, with all due respect, I employ 43 people. I generate over $6 million in annual revenue for this state. My company has renovated 3 downtown buildings and created hundreds of construction jobs. Perhaps we could focus on bigger pictures here." The silence that followed was absolute. Christina Blackwell had just told a sitting judge that her economic contributions made her above the law. I stood up. When I stand during proceedings, everyone in my courtroom knows something significant is happening. Christina seemed to sense the shift, but her arrogance wouldn't let her back down. "Mrs. Blackwell, did you just suggest that your business success exempts you from parking laws?" "I'm suggesting that reasonable people recognize reasonable priorities. I create value, I solve problems, I make things happen." Her voice carried the conviction of someone who'd never been challenged. "My time generates measurable economic benefit. Sitting here debating 20-minute parking violations doesn't. I've presided over thousands of cases. I've seen every type of defendant: scared teenagers, hardened criminals, confused elderly people, desperate parents. But I'd never encountered someone who genuinely believed their bank account made them immune to accountability. Mrs. Blackwell, let me share something with you about value creation. I walked around my bench, eliminating the formal distance between us. Mrs. Martinez, the mother who carried her disabled son through the rain. She's a volunteer coordinator at the Children's Hospital. She organizes therapy sessions for 50 families every week. No salary, no recognition, just service. Christina's jaw tightened. That's admirable, Your Honor, but volunteer work doesn't pay for medical equipment or hospital renovations. Actually, it does. Mrs. Martinez has coordinated fundraising efforts that have generated over $200,000 for pediatric equipment in the past 3 years. While you were getting Botox consultations, she was improving children's lives. The gallery began to stir. I could feel the community's reaction to Christina's dismissive attitude toward their volunteer heroes. But I wasn't finished with Mrs. Blackwell's education. Mrs. Blackwell, your company, Blackwell Development, is it currently involved in any legal disputes? Her lawyer, who had been silent until now, tried to object. Your Honor, that's not relevant to a parking violation. Actually, Counselor, when your client claims community contribution as justification for illegal behavior, her actual community impact becomes very relevant. I opened another file my staff had prepared. In my years on this bench, I've learned that character reveals itself in patterns, not isolated incidents. What I found about Christina Blackwell's business practices painted a disturbing picture. Mrs. Blackwell, your company is named defendant in 6 current lawsuits: 3 for construction defects in low-income housing projects, 2 for environmental violations, 1 for discriminatory hiring practices. Does this sound like community contribution to you? Christina's face flushed. Those lawsuits are frivolous, disgruntled contractors and activist lawyers looking for payouts, including the lawsuit from the Providence Housing Authority alleging you use substandard materials in senior citizen housing, the one where elderly residents are dealing with heating failures and water damage. But there was more, much more. I continued reading from the file. Mrs. Blackwell, according to these records, your company received a city contract to renovate affordable housing units on the south side. The contract specified energy-efficient windows and updated insulation. Instead, you installed windows that barely meet minimum standards and used insulation that was 20% below specification. Elderly residents on fixed incomes are now paying heating bills triple what they were promised. Christina's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, my client's business practices aren't on trial here. Sit down, Counselor. Your client brought up her community contributions. I'm simply examining what those contributions actually look like. I turned back to Christina, whose confidence was visibly crumbling. Mrs. Blackwell, would you like to explain why your company billed the city for premium materials while installing substandard products in housing for our most vulnerable residents? Your Honor, construction is about meeting specifications within budget constraints. Whose budget constraints? Not the city's. They paid for quality materials. The constraint was your desire for maximum profit, wasn't it? The courtroom was riveted. This wasn't just about parking anymore. This was about a pattern of exploitation disguised as community service. Let me read you something else, Mrs. Blackwell. I picked up another document. This is a complaint filed by Maria Santos, an 82-year-old widow living in your Elm Street property. She reported heating problems in December. Your company's response? Tenant is responsible for additional heating costs beyond basic provision. Mrs. Santos spent her Christmas Eve in her daughter's crowded apartment because her unit was uninhabitable. Christina tried to interrupt, but I wasn't finished. Mrs. Santos called your office 17 times. 17. Your company told her the heating met minimum legal requirements and suggested she dress warmer if she was uncomfortable. An 82-year-old woman, Mrs. Blackwell, dress warmer. The gallery was murmuring now. I could see people shaking their heads, some clearly angry. These weren't abstract legal issues. These were their neighbors, their grandmothers. Your Honor, we have thousands of tenants. We can't customize heating for individual preferences. Customization? Mrs. Blackwell, heating an apartment to livable temperatures isn't customization. It's basic human decency, something your company seems to have forgotten in pursuit of profits. For the first time, Christina Blackwell looked genuinely uncomfortable. Your Honor, construction projects are complex. Sometimes issues arise that require resolution. Issues like choosing cheaper materials to maximize profit while elderly residents suffer through winter without heat. But I had saved the most damning evidence for last. Mrs. Blackwell, are you familiar with the name David Chen? He was a contractor who worked on your Riverside Plaza project. Her face went pale. She knew exactly who David Chen was. Mr. Chen submitted bills for work completed on your project, quality work, on time, meeting all specifications. Your company paid him for approximately 60% of his invoices. The remaining 40%, nearly $48,000, remains unpaid 18 months later. Christina's voice became defensive. There were disputes about the quality of work. No, Mrs. Blackwell, there were no disputes until Mr. Chen demanded full payment. Your company suddenly discovered quality issues only after he requested what he was owed. Mr. Chen had to take a second mortgage on his home to pay his subcontractors. His family nearly lost their house because you decided that keeping his money was more profitable than paying your bills. The courtroom was absolutely silent. People were staring at Christina with genuine disgust. Mr. Chen is in this courtroom today, Mrs. Blackwell. Would you like to explain to him why his family suffered financial hardship so your company could improve its profit margins? A man in the third row stood up, David Chen, a weathered contractor in his 50s. Your Honor, may I speak? I nodded. Mrs. Blackwell, I worked 7 months on your project, 12-hour days, weekends, holidays. My crew and I delivered exactly what we promised. When you refused to pay, you didn't just hurt me. You hurt every worker who counted on that money to feed their families. David's voice carried the weight of honest labor betrayed by corporate greed. I've been a contractor for 23 years. I've never had to sue a client for payment until I met your company. You taught me that some people think hard work is something you can steal if you have better lawyers. The gallery erupted in supportive murmurs. Christina tried to respond, but David wasn't finished. You know what's worse than not getting paid? Watching you sit there acting like you're better than everyone else when you built your wealth on the backs of people you refused to pay. That parking spot you blocked, the family you inconvenienced, that's exactly who you are, someone who takes what she wants and ignores who gets hurt. David sat back down to sustained applause. I let it continue longer than usual because sometimes communities need to express their values collectively. When the courtroom finally quieted, I looked directly at Christina. Her arrogance had completely evaporated, replaced by something that looked like genuine shock. Mrs. Blackwell, in 38 years on this bench, I've seen every type of defendant, but I've rarely encountered someone who so consistently prioritizes personal benefit over community welfare while claiming to be a community benefactor. The courtroom was completely silent now. Every person watching understood they were witnessing something extraordinary, a wealthy defendant being held accountable for treating community welfare as a profit opportunity. I returned to my bench and picked up my gavel. Mrs. Blackwell, here's what's going to happen. Your parking fine is increased to the maximum allowable $1,500. You will complete 60 hours of community service at Providence General Hospital, specifically assisting families with disabled children navigate the parking and access challenges you created. And you will write a formal letter of apology to Mrs. Martinez and every family affected by your selfishness that morning. Christina's voice was shrill. $1,500 for 20 minutes of parking, for 20 minutes of blocking disabled children's access to medical care while you pursued cosmetic procedures, for treating our community's most vulnerable families as acceptable collateral damage for your convenience, for believing that wealth exempts you from basic human decency. I continued, my voice carrying the authority of decades spent defending justice. Furthermore, Mrs. Blackwell, your driver's license is suspended for 30 days. During that time, I suggest you use public transportation. Learn how working families navigate this city. Develop some perspective on whose time and convenience actually matter. As Christina stood there stunned, a voice from the gallery spoke up. Your Honor, may I say something? An elderly man with a veteran's cap stood slowly, using a walker for support. I'm Robert Chen, Korean War veteran. I've watched this woman disrespect everything about this courtroom and this community. Thank you for showing her that money can't buy immunity from consequences. The gallery erupted in applause, real sustained applause from working people, elderly citizens, young parents, the community Christina Blackwell had spent her morning dismissing as inconsequential. I banged my gavel for order, but I let the applause continue a moment longer than usual. Sometimes communities need to express their values. Mrs. Blackwell, I said as the courtroom quieted, you'll report to the court clerk to arrange your community service schedule. You'll surrender your license to the bailiff. And you'll begin learning that true community contribution isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in how you treat people when you think nobody's watching. Christina Blackwell left my courtroom a different person than the one who'd entered. Her designer heels clicked with less authority. Her shoulders carried a weight that money couldn't remove. 6 months later, she returned to show proof of completed community service. The woman who stood before me had learned something valuable about value creation. She'd spent 60 hours helping families like the Martinezes navigate challenges she'd never considered. She'd apologized with genuine remorse. She'd discovered that true wealth comes from lifting others up, not stepping over them. That's what justice looks like. Not revenge, not humiliation, but transformation. Teaching people that in a civilized society, everyone matters, especially those who need our protection most. Christina Blackwell learned that day that money is just paper. Character is what gives life value. And in my courtroom, character matters more than capital. Justice served, lesson learned, community protected. That's why I do this work.